Israel today at 2.
Central to car 7173K. Central to car 7173K.
7173, Central.
7173 ESU supervisor confirmed a hostage incident at 405 East 105 Street, Department 5H. You copy?
7173, 10-4, on the way.
He commands the hostage unit of the New York Police Department, Captain Frank Bolz. His work has attracted international attention. Captain Bolz, one of the world's foremost experts in handling this modern form of terrorism. His life dedicated to saving lives. Captain Frank Bolz, our guest on News Forum today. It's High Noon Sunday. I'm Gabe Pressman. Welcome, Captain.
Hi, Gabe.
Captain Bolz, is this phenomenon, hostage-taking, is it still on the rise?
Well, I think terrorism in general is on the rise. I think in New York, we've been able to maintain sort of a lid on the number of hostage situations that we've had because we try not to treat the person who is holding a hostage as a hero. We realize that many of these people are caught in a situation where they don't know how to get out of it. So what we try to do in a situation like that is relieve their tension. Others who are having psychological problems, we try to assist them and get them some psychological help.
Now, the profile of the hostage taker, of the terrorist in this kind of a situation in Europe and other parts of the world, is it quite different than the profile here in general?
Well, we haven't been hit with too many of that type terrorist situation.
That is the political terrorist.
The political type. Although we have had 4 missions taken over by various people in the 8 or 9 years that we've been dealing with hostage situations in New York. Fortunately, I think the way our city and our police departments are structured, the way the relationship between the FBI and the local police, it puts a little bit of a team effort that has tended to hold people back. I think over in Europe, a lot of the different police agencies are fighting with each other. They're just now coming around to getting into a team operation, and they're becoming more successful.
But the ingredients of a classic hostage-taking situation here, as seen through your eyes, are what?
Well, I think basically in a terrorist kind of situation, it's the need to want to get attention, and I think they're going to look for an opportunity to get good media coverage. I think what really personified that was the incident that took place over in Munich back in 1972, on September 5th at the Munich Olympics.
Of course, that was political motivation.
That was totally politically motivated, but they had prepared for that incident at least 4 months before. They had put 2 people working as part of the Olympic Committee's staff for 2 months prior to that incident. And they knew there'd be over 3,000 members of the news media present at that incident.
And then when they assassinated the Israeli athletes, they had the attention that they wanted.
They had the attention that they wanted, and I think in that particular instance, if I may, at least in the deaths of those 11 athletes, fortunately the world learned something, and other people's lives may have been saved from what we learned from that particular incident.
That's how the hostage unit of the New York PD was started, is that right?
That's correct. Cy Eisdorfer was the chief of our Special Operations Division, and he went to at that time Police Commissioner Pat Murphy and said that he felt that this kind of terrorism, this kind of criminality could come over to our shores. Here we have
what was that, about 73?
1972 we started, right. Actually. We put the program together, and that was a combined operation involving the Police Academy, the Emergency Service Division, and the patrol forces, and I was the representative from the Detective Division, and we put together a set of guidelines.
Did Attica have something to do with it, too?
Yes, Attica was something that happened the year before, the August before, or the year before, actually. And in that situation, we learned a good deal from what happened up there. We learned the importance of making sure that people are trained together, they work together, that they've gone through various parts of training. For example, the use of tear gas. Many of the people involved in that incident had never been involved in the use of tear gas.
Captain, it's been 9 years since this unit was started in the police department. Have you ever lost a hostage so far?
Knock wood, we have never lost a hostage. We've never lost a police officer once we start negotiating, and we've only lost one perpetrator who committed suicide before we were able to reestablish contact with him. We have had others try to commit suicide. One in particular actually electrocuted himself. His heart had stopped beating, and we dragged him up out of the cellar out in Queens. The emergency service people there put down their shotguns, ripped off their bulletproof vests, started giving CPR, and they brought this guy back to life.
What about the man who did commit suicide? Did you have any warning that he was going to do it?
Well, we found out...
In hindsight, dear.
In hindsight, we found out that he had gone through the suicide ritual. This is something we've learned since in the research that we've done, that there are such things as a surrender ritual when somebody is going to come out after he finally decides it's time to bring this to a conclusion.
And what's the suicide ritual?
And the suicide ritual is where he goes through a catharsis of all his worldly goods and starts to give away his money to his mother or to his family because he can't take it with him, tries to say he's sorry for everything that he's done, and just has a general catharsis. And the last words, as this man let the last hostage out, and their fingers parted in this way, he said, "Pray for me." Of course, we didn't hear that. We got that after he retreated back into the store, and he put the gun to his head and fired. And I'll never forget to this day the words of that emergency service cop who said, "He did it. He did it." And that was it. It was over.
Do I understand that sometimes potential suicides will ask for something like cigars or whiskey or something like that?
Well, in this particular situation, that cigar was one thing that he wanted. He had a sandwich, he had some coffee, and he wanted a good cigar. And it was not that he wanted a smoke, but he wanted a good cigar.
And that was a tip-off, you think?
That should have been the tip-off. We just didn't recognize it. And we didn't have enough experience at that point in time. But now we're a little more careful about each word that is said. And that cigar was rounding out the finality of his dinner and the finality of his life.
Some of your friends and admirers say that not only have you enjoyed great luck in your exploits in the police department, but they attribute to you an ability to talk your way out of anything.
That's not so.
No.
I've been very fortunate, but I think it's a team operation. I think, nobody stands and talks to Frank Bolz unless they have to, really. Either they paid their money and they have to sit there, or somebody's holding a shotgun or a machine gun on them and keeping them in there until I finish my spiel, until I finish negotiating with them. But I think in the formative years, I was a textile salesman in the garment center. I learned to speak to people. I liked people all my life, and I think those are the qualities and traits that we look for when we look for negotiators. We want people who like people, who are people-oriented. And it's quite there is a price that we all pay for our service, whether it be the emergency service people or the negotiators. I've seen a lot of our negotiators at the end of a job. They would go home, and I experienced it myself, sleepless nights, wake up with the shakes, nausea, inability to eat.
Why?
Because you were going through a tremendous anxiety reaction. What we have done when we negotiate with the perpetrator is to relieve him of his anxiety, but what we do is actually reflect and we absorb the anxiety that he had, and we have it.
Sounds like pretty heavy psychological stuff you're giving me, Captain.
Well, we didn't realize how important it was, but after a while we noticed that if we would end this job, say 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and we'd all retire to a restaurant, have something to eat, a couple of drinks, and some guys didn't even drink, just Coca-Cola. But if we had that 2-hour session, and then you went home, you were kind of relieved. You didn't have much difficulty in sleeping. And you were able to get to sleep, you were able to hold down food.
An unwinding process.
It was actually group therapy. Dr. Harvey Schlussberg, who was my colleague in the formation of this, when we spoke to him about it, he says, "Frank, what you're doing is you're having a group therapy session." And now, after every job...
So the hostage cops of New York have group therapy sessions?
You might call it that. It's a winding down process, as you said, but we have our group therapy sessions after an incident. As a matter of fact, I even pay overtime, if necessary, to these people, because it's a heck of a lot cheaper than having these guys have to go seek psychiatric help.
Let's talk about some of the major cases that your unit has handled after this message.
What is it? It's Frank here. Do you want to talk to me?
What's your name again?
My name is Frank Bolz.
What's your name again, Frank?
Frank Bolz.
Bolz?
Bolz, like, soup bowls. You put the soup in bowls.
Frank Bolz.
Yeah.
You people, I don't know what's wrong with
Back.
That particular job, we kept good discipline of firepower, even though hundreds of shots were fired out. And after a certain amount of time, the owner of the store, who was himself a hostage, remembered a back staircase because they had heard a noise as we were testing drilling to get in from the basement. And when the perpetrators went up to the roof from the one side...
You distracted them with gunfire, huh?
No. We didn't use gunfire. We were drilling into the basement.
Oh, I see.
And they went upstairs, and the owner went up a different stairwell to the rooftop. And the first person out on that rooftop was a male black with a .45 caliber revolver in his hand. And that fit the description of the perpetrators. But what it was one of the employees with a gun that had been secreted in this stairwell, and it was just because of the discipline of the emergency service that no shots were fired.
So it was a secret exit, and that's how you got the hostages out.
That's how they got out, just by sheer luck.
What about Floyd Steele and the little girl?
That was a job, that was the second longest job we had. It was 37 hours long. This was a man who had been living with a family, and he had been in various mental institutions and prisons pretty much all his life, had killed 2 other people, had gone to mental institutions, had a fight with the mother and father of Letitia Kinsler. He shot the father, and then he held the little girl.
And you talked to him at great length.
Talked to him for about 18 hours out of that 33 hours, and then finally, while exchanging food, and the little girl came close enough, I was able to grab hold of her hand and snatch her out.
Through the open door, huh?
Through the open door. I was facing, staring down at a .357 Magnum, watching the gun, watching the cockroaches go up, watching the gun, and then finally, when she came close enough, I was able to snatch her out, and Danny St. John was able to pull me out with the girl, and after he had no hostage, faced down a shotgun, and he put the weapon down. It was all over.
More after this.
Becomes a person who is informing the public that they should not become participants.
Floyd Steele. What did you talk to him about for, what was it, 33 hours?
33 hours. Well, I spoke to him for about 18 hours.
Through an open door?
Through an open door. First through a closed door because he fired a few shots and he said close the door. And when someone punctuates that kind of a statement with a few shots. But then I started talking to him about how he grew up and where he grew up and how he had been a Gandhi dancer on the railroad, in the Southern Railroad. And we talked about the comparisons of travel. When he was a kid, they were still traveling on wagons out west.
And you call him Floyd and he calls you Frank?
I called him Mr. Steele. He always called him Mr.
I see.
He never bothered to call me anything, really. Just, hey, cop, more or less, hey, cop. But I called him Mr. Steele.
I understand at one point in those 33 hours you were talking about growing flowers?
Geraniums. That's what we had gotten talking to him about, geraniums.
There's a guy with a big gun in his hand, ready to blow your brains out, and you're talking flowers?
Well, he enjoyed it. You look to try to get him to ventilate, actually. That's why we need people who like people and who can stimulate them to talk.
Do you ever have old-school police commanders who say, let's forget all this talking, let's go in and get those bastards?
Well, we have
forgive the expression.
We have had incidents. Unfortunately, from time to time, you get a boss. Sometimes he's getting pressure from the outside, and they want to bring it to a conclusion very, very quickly. And he's getting pressure, and he starts to put pressure on everyone else. But one of the key principles of this program is that it goes until it's finished. The only time we might use a direct assault is if we feel that there is a death-threatening situation which is imminent to that innocent hostage who is in there. But we're constantly updating our intelligence to find this out.
What about, I understand that the State Department, during the height of the Iranian hostage crisis, asked for your advice. What did you tell them?
Well, in the first 2 weeks, I told them a lot of things to do, but they didn't do it.
Such as?
I felt that they had a certain window of time in the beginning where if they had put a complete kind of containment around that country, not unlike what we do in the job here. Let our various allies know that we are going to lock in that country completely. But I think we were suffering in this country from the lack of intelligence, lack of information, because we had gone, because of a few problems, because of a few violations that were done by some of our intelligence people, they more or less just swung the axe and cut down our intelligence tree completely. And so we were playing catch-up ball. And we didn't have the wherewithal to actually do all of these things that would have been more appropriate.
Getting back to the hostage situation in New York City, not the international hostage situation of Iran, what do you see as the fundamental fallacy, say, in the Attica situation, if there was one?
Well, basically, there are a lot. I don't know if they call it one thing. Well, I guess the one key issue was they ran out of patience. Politics pushed them to the point where they ran out of patience, because these incidents, it's no big deal to the cons, to the inmates, because it's a change of the.
You don't think that several dozen people had to be killed?
No, I don't think they should have had to be killed. And don't forget, 11 hostages were also killed. 10 of them succumbed to wounds from firearms, and the inmates had no firearms. So a prudent man would have to assume it was their rescuers coming in that actually caused their death, not to mention the deaths also of those prisoners, because some of those prisoners might have been able to be released in a couple of years.
I know you met your wife, Ruth is her name, is that right?
Right.
At a PAL dance, Police Athletic League dance, when you were a much younger man?
Oh, yes, when I was a young boy, 16 years old.
Does she ever have second thoughts about your career as a man who talks people out of doing crazy things?
Well, I think she's like a lot of cops' wives. They all worry. They all sit at home, and they all worry. Sometimes the problem that she faces is that I might be live on television from the scene of a bank or somewhere, and if I did get shot, if I did get killed, she wouldn't need the minister or the priest to come around, the chaplain, to tell her. She'd know right away. And that's the biggest problem, and for that I feel sorry that I have to put her through that kind of a thing. So a lot of times she'll just turn off the TV and put music on or something else.
Bolz's doctrine, the key is to prevent bloodshed. Is that about the size of it?
I think so. I think in the situation, whether it be the perpetrator himself or the hostage or the cop, and I think that's why we've been able to sell it to other cops throughout the world. We've trained people from over 1,600 police departments throughout this country and many from throughout the world. And I think we've been able to sell it because we haven't lost, knock wood, one cop since we started this program. And unfortunately, we in New York go to way too many police funerals year in and year out.
And if you had any advice to give in about 20 seconds or so to somebody who gets taken as a hostage?
Well, if you get taken as a hostage, you do exactly what you're told to do. Treat them like royalty, follow orders, and just be courteous, look at them, eye contact, but don't stare them down. And if you hear a noise and people are coming in, hit the deck and stay low and follow whatever orders are given to you.
Thank you, Captain Bolz, for being our guest today. Frank Bolz, commander of the New York Police Department's hostage unit. This is Gabe Pressman. Enjoy your day.
As long as it takes. We don't put an end on it. As long as it takes to bring them out safely. That's the main thing, so that nobody gets hurt.
Floyd Steele.